heavy,
bored,
where he quotes directly from Whitman. But the dedication that he wrote himself, like we said, is talking about Neal Cassady, Burroughs, Kerouac, like all these people that he was writing with, giving drafts to. So he dedicates the entire book to Jack Kerouac, new Buddha of American prose, who spit forth intelligence into 11 books written in only half the number of years, 1951 to 1956. On the Road, Visions of Neil, Dr. Sachs, Springtime Mary, The Subterranean, San Francisco Blues, Some of the Dharma, Book of Dreams, Wake Up, Mexico City Blues, and Visions of Gerard. Creating a spontaneous bop prosody and original classic literature. Several phrases and the title of Howl are taken from him. William Seward Burroughs, author of Naked Lunch, an endless novel which will drive everybody mad. And it is an endless novel, and it's not good, listeners, but yeah.
It is maddening.
Yeah. Neal Cassady, author of The First Third, an autobiography, 1949, which enlightened Buddha. Yeah, dude, like he just didn't give a... Oh, yeah, he's purposely pushing buttons. He's like, all these books are published in heaven. And it kind of gives you this idea of... Ginsberg, while he took this very seriously, he also understood that it was just art, right? Like it was just kind of not nonsense. And we make this argument all the time here, but it was like, the kind of don't take yourself too seriously shit that everybody talks about and says all the time as a cliche. Well, like he was that guy, like where he would be dead serious about certain things and then just be like joking, full of jokes, laughing, little bits that he knew was going to piss off, academics and or the high-minded society that rejected him and tried to censor his book. I say that too. Like this is an interesting book to pull out, dude, right now at this time, because at this time when this book was banned, literally the federal government was after him, shutting down bookstores, taking copies off shelves. Shit that we have not seen in the country in my lifetime. I mean, that hasn't happened really since like the 70s or anything like that. Really even before, the 60s maybe, where there was like a lot of revolutionary shit in the country. And again, I can only know that from reading because I wasn't alive. But dude, you imagine if you got your book banned for obscenity today? I just do not think that academics would go into court and argue in front of a judge that your book has literary merit. I just don't think that would happen today, regardless of what it was, regardless of what you were doing. There's just freedom to be creative and like freedom of artists particularly, and this overlaps with freedom of speech and all that. Like it just isn't there now. Like this just wouldn't happen if you had your book and like you had the entire world up against you trying to ban your book for some type of obscenity or whatever it is. Nowadays it would be some type of accusation, and then they would not defend you. Like it just doesn't exist right now anymore. Nobody would come and defend your stuff as having literary merit and your freedom to create and all that stuff. It just doesn't exist right now. And not to say that it would never come back or that this would never happen. We're just in a weird period right now where like censorship is considered great when it comes to art. And we have to make Taylor Swift change her music video because people are upset it says fat or whatever on a scale. But yeah.
Well, and this is also like something that was considered very much of the counterculture, and they took a lot of like pride in that, it seems, right?
Dude, I'm glad you brought that up, dude. The counterculture, and listeners get ready for this with like this kind of...
You're about to hear a rant.
Yeah, counterculture, and that's so important. Is art has always been the counterculture, like. And we talked about this a little bit on the Bogan episode when she talked about her being afraid of being a square because she was a New Yorker, poetry critic, this high-minded, that high literary scene in New York City. She wasn't part of the counterculture. And all the great art from, most movements throughout history, if you study this shit, came from the counterculture. It came from these kind of people that rejected the academic consensus, that rejected the stuff that came before them to some extent, right? Not entirely, but like...
Well, or they responded really strongly to what
right.
came before them and made adjustments, right? Like they had a strong reaction.
And this is
so it wasn't always a rejection outright.
The biggest problem we have right now in literature, and I think this is part of the reason that it feels so hollow and empty to a lot of people with no community, is that counterculture is shunned in art right now. Like there is no counterculture. Like if you try to do something,
what would that even be?
If you try to do something counter to the current culture or the mainstream culture, the consensus, whatever it is, again, you will have your book removed, you will have your book deal taken away from you, You will not be defended by academics in court like Ginsberg was. You will be shunned. Your career will be over. Like, there is no counterculture. So therefore, art sucks right now. Like, how can you make good art if there is no counterculture to go to? And then, this changed throughout history. You can point to different aspects. Like, the counterculture isn't always the same, even in the 20th century, right? 20th century, the counterculture was something very specific. In the 50s, it changed a little bit in the 60s and then 70s and all that, right? In the 80s, 90s, but like counterculture was always a huge part of art. And since it doesn't exist right now, that literally the only thing we can do is repeat what we hear in newspapers and see on social media timelines. That's literally all we're allowed to do in art right now. If you deviate from any of that, you are literally not allowed to publish. Like, I think it makes me sad, but it also makes me nostalgic for this book again. Like, reading this book, I read it, when I was younger, a teenager, in college. I hadn't read it in maybe 10 years or more. And I pulled it out, this little copy on my shelf. And it was like a breath of fresh air just going back and reading it, dude. Just, like this counterculture, this purposely being like, fuck you, cock and endless balls. Right there in my poem, that's an homage to Whitman. Right there. Cock and endless balls. Right there. And it's great. It's great. I think we need to develop a new counterculture to some extent. Like, that's always varying degrees. All of it. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I agree.
Resources, American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.